So regardless of whether you've watched my first video on how to do a setup, um, the video that I did before pretty much just goes over something that you probably would have done or have done with our coloring page assignment, where I went around and saw generalized shapes in whatever subject that I'm focusing on, and I added, closed forms, and then I pretty much colored it in. So what happens after an initial setup like this is I would start adding some sort of texture and line in order to copy what you've seen in the Fauvist research that you've done. Complementary colors, especially from what I've shown, or at least what I've demonstrated here in this middle ground section, were very prominent in Fauvist artworks. Like I had said in my other video, I focused on one area at a time. So I went on this middle ground, and then I went to this top part in the background, and then I went to the foreground. But whatever makes sense to you, I recommend starting on one section and filling out, your colors and your closed forms before you go to the next one. So after you're finished with that setup, I would think about what part of your composition that you want to suggest movement. Lines and texture specifically were utilized in the Fauvist movement, and the combinations of lines and texture along with alternating complementary colors will provide you with a sense of movement with whatever composition that you're making. What I decided to do for my texture and lines that I'm going to add in order to simulate some sort of movement. And so one thing that I found is there's a brush called the synthetic bristle round brush, and it creates an effect and a line very similar to what you would do in a real canvas with paint. So I'm just going to show you real quick. What I've decided to do is get the color that I'm going to that I've used basically as my base color for my fog or smoke that I'm trying to add movement to. And so I'm going to go around a little bit and add some little accents and try to add some sense of movement before I add any more layers. I would mostly stick to maybe one direction whenever you're trying to add things like this, because if you go a little bit too haphazard or too all over the place, it might not work quite as well. But whatever you decide to do, you'll definitely find something that works for you as the more that you explore. So just like I was showing you before, this is a setup of the line and at least some sort of lines that I'm going to use to convey movement. What I'm also going to do is I'm going to add some complementary colors, just like I did here, at least something to help break up and add some movement along with the lines and the colors that I'm using. And the neat thing that you can see with this brush is not only does it start kind of strong and trail out to where it kind of is thin, it also seems to blend with certain parts of the background and other effects that I've done. So I'm just going to add a couple of lines. And then what I'm going to do after I'm done with this, I'm going to go back and add some more blue to at least, add some contrast. And I'll probably go back over with the initial color just to, make sure that I add and cover up some of this, because using, letting some of this show might work pretty well, but for what I'm trying to do, it's not exactly what I need at the moment. So I'm just going to cover that up again. So let's see what happens when I add a little bit of a complementary color to orange. And you can always go back and manipulate this a little bit further by, fixing certain things. If something doesn't look quite right, like if you might have used too many lines in a certain area, you can go back and use, like the same, kind of eyedropper tool to pick up the color that you had before, so then you stay consistent. So here is the end product of what I've done with my example. As you go along with your project, and as an artist, it's up for you to decide how far that you go with your added effects in your composition. At the moment, I'm mostly satisfied with what I've done here. I might go and add other little bits and probably clean up this section because that stands out and doesn't look as good as I would want it to. But at least for this video, I wanted to show you, what I've done. As always, explore your composition, do your best, and have fun.